ache a little bit. Work has been kicking my ass, because I'm an old man. How old am I, you ask? Probably too old to be doing this shit, but fuck it. It is Wednesday. It's odd that I had to think about that. It's Wednesday, and it's time for another episode of... I don't even know what I called these episodes. Screw it, episode. Episode of Weekend Reading, where we talk about what we read last week, what we're reading this week, and a little food for thought about questions about, the comic book industry at large. Or comic books at large. Okay, so first off, what did we read last week? Well, to refresh your memory, we had John Walker, U.S. Agent, American Zealot. We had Thor, Volume 2, Prey. And we had Future State, The Next Batman. Now, Future State, The Next Batman was my choice for pick of the week. It was not. It felt like an incomplete story, which I guess it is, but it just didn't hit me the way I hoped it would. The one that did was Thor Volume 2, Prey. This was a really good read. Donny Cates, I shouldn't have doubted him. His fucking storytelling has usually been really exciting for me, and his work on Thor, the first volume was really cool. This was definitely really cool too. That's, stellar endorsement. It was actually told two stories. The first two issues told a little small story about Thor coming to terms with making peace with Beta Ray Bill and a little adventure involving people in Bronx and Oklahoma and Tony Stark, and trying to test that if other people could lift his hammer, which they can. That's a problem for him because he's not the only one. He's finding his hammer is heavier to lift for him, but for some reason now everyone else can lift it, which means they can access his powers anytime they want, and that's not good. The next story is the bigger main portion of the story, and that has to do with the whole thing with his hammer. He's curious about why all these ancient magics aren't working the way they're supposed to anymore, so he decides to do something he hasn't done in a while. He decides to trade places with Donald Blake, a thing he hasn't done. He hasn't used the Donald Blake identity in a long, long time. And they kind of expand on what happens to Donald Blake when he and Thor switch places. Donald Blake apparently, he was created by Odin and to be Thor's mortal persona, and when he switches places with Thor, when Thor has his hammer and they switch places, Donald Blake basically goes to a fake world created by Odin that he is supposed to never know was fake. But the magics that went wrong with Thor's hammer seem to have affected this too, because somewhere along the way, Donald Blake realized that he was in an illusion and went crazy. And he actually even managed to kill the World Serpent and steal his power. Somehow he has the ability to steal Norse-based magic. So he switches places with Thor. Thor gets trapped in the world that Donald Blake was in. The whole reason he did this is that Thor, normally when he in that switch places thing, is that he's supposed to enter this kind of weird, like this weird godlike sleep where he can commune with his ancient ancestors. But he wasn't able to do this time. He was lured into a trap. He ended up in the Donald Blake place. Donald Blake ended up in the real world. He attacked Asgard. He somehow stole Beta Ray Bill's powers. He sent the Asgard. He stole Sif's sword and used it to send all the Asgardians to some weird hell dimension. I think it's called like the blood dimension or something. And then he started killing anybody who had Thor-like powers. He killed a guy called the Red Norville who used to possess Thor's powers. Or I think his name was just Red Norville. And then he went even after Throg, the frog Thor, but ended up getting his ass kicked. Jane Foster got involved as her Valkyrie persona and fought him. She even went to go recruit Odin, who's revealed that he's weaker than he used to be because he passed the Odin Force onto Thor, because Thor is now king of Asgard. They all ended up, and Doctor Strange even got involved, and they all ended up fighting Donald Blake, who's become wildly powerful because he's just been stealing powers, and Thor found a way to channel his spirit into the Destroyer armor, and he fought Donald Blake, and then Loki helped Thor, bring himself back out of the realm he was in fully, and then he defeated Donald Blake in combat, and he didn't know what to do with him. Of course, everybody blamed Odin because it was kind of Odin's weird fuck-up, and Thor wouldn't let Odin kill him. So he had to figure out what to do with Donald Blake, so he has Loki in prison. Loki basically imprisons him in the same prison he used to be in, where, if you know Norse mythology, Loki was like chained up and he had like a serpent dropping venom into his eyes for all eternity. And basically Loki said like he gave him his title as the God of Lies, so it seems like Donald Blake's been defeated, but something tells me he won't be gone for good because he's crazy and he's got a lot of power, and he hates Asgardians, especially Odin. He wanted to kill Odin and steal his power. But it was a really good story. If it sounds crazy and confusing, it was, but it was a good one. So yeah, Thor Volume 2. That was the read of the week. What do we got coming up this week, though? Glad you asked. This week, we have Family Tree, Volume 3, Forest, by Jeff Lemire and Phil Hester. This has been an interesting read. Really weird one. Really weird story about a little girl turning into a tree because it's part of her heritage. That makes any sense. That's the story, and it somehow leads to the apocalypse. Let's read the description. But, Jeff Lemire is usually a good read, so let's read the description. The supernatural drama concludes. Okay, so this is the last volume, so this should be good. As all members of the Hayes family, new and old, alive and dead, fight their way through the end of the world. Can they protect one another in the face of impossible odds? And when death as we know it isn't the end, is anything ever really over? Best-selling award-winning writer Jeff Lemire from Gideon Falls, A Slender, Sweet Tooth, and superstar artist Phil Hester of Shipwreck and Green Arrow come together for Family Tree, a genre-defying epic about the lengths a mother will go to keep her children safe in a world of unspeakable horrors. It's been an okay read. Next up, we have King in Black, Return of the Valkyries, by Jason Aaron, Torun Grunbeck. It's an O with like the little line from it, so I think you pronounce it differently. Nina Naqueva and Tamra Bonvillain. I always pronounce her name wrong. Yeah, this is part of, as the name suggests, this is part of the whole King in Black big event that they haven't even done the main thing for. They release all the side shit first, but this was a side thing because I've been reading Valkyrie, and they kind of did the Valkyries dirty in the whole War of the Realms thing, so it'll be nice to see if they actually come back. Let's read the description. Once there was an army of Valkyries, and now Jane Foster is the only one. When Null and his symbiote horrors come to Earth and the planet's guardian, the Sentry, falls, all Jane sees when she looks at our big blue planet is a vision of death. To help stop the King in Black, Jane must rebuild the Valkyries, starting with Hildegard, a warrior from Asgard's hallowed halls, and the X-Men Danny Moonstar, a former Valkyrie herself. But what Jane doesn't know is that she was never the only Valkyrie after all. Who is the fourth warrior? Elsewhere, unknown to Jane, Null's power has spread across the galaxy and infected creatures even older than the gods, and it may not matter how many Valkyries Jane can bring to the aid. Collecting King in Black, Return of the Valkyries 1 through 4. So, you know, it seems a little off kilter, but you know, Jason Aaron's usually been a good read, so I can't really dismiss it outright. So we'll see. But here's my pick for pick of the week. That would be, it's another Future State one. I was wrong about the last one. We'll see if I am about this one. That would be Future State, Justice League. Justice League has been a good read, so I'm interested in this one. Let's see. The future is now. In the far-flung future, an all-new Justice League must investigate the mysterious death of their greatest foes, the Legion of Doom. The Justice League Dark emerges from years of hiding to fight villainous forces stalking supernatural horrors and villains alike. Jon Stewart and his band of abandoned Green Lanterns must hold the line against an invasion of murderous zealots in an uncharted dark sector after their rings have stopped working. Barry Allen battles for the soul of his former Flash partner, Wally West, and Jackson Hyde and Andy Curry, son of Black Manta and daughter of Aquaman, must find each other again after being torn apart if they hope to escape the mysterious universe-spanning One Great Ocean. Let's see. This volume collects Future State Flash, Future State Aquaman, Future State Green Lantern, and Future State Justice League, including all the thrilling Green Lantern Corps and Justice League Dark backup stories. Also features a Future State character design gallery. Okay, so it's like one issue each, just covering the Justice League and a bunch of other characters. We already seen that Batman and Superman get their own titles, and I think Wonder Woman does too, because there's like a lot of Wonder Woman shit. But yeah, I think this could be the read of the week. It's a kind of whatever week. Not to dismiss any of these books, they all look fine, but you know, nothing really stands out that great. So I think this will be my pick of the week, and I think I'll be right this time. But we'll see. Now that that's all out of the way, what is the question of the week? I think that should be long enough. The question of the week this week is, it's not as specific as it has been in the past couple of weeks. This is a very general question. And it's one that just kind of came to me when I was reading one of the many online debates about whatever. And that is, what is the most useless debate in comic books? Now, one might argue that any debate about comic books is useless because it's just useless to debate about comic books in general for many reasons. Some might say they're just a art form for the immature, and it's just dumb to have an argument about them, which is kind of dismissive and insulting, but, you know, I get it. Some might say that it's just a stupid thing to debate about because it's just a form of entertainment, and why debate about any kind of entertainment? Fair. Some might say that it's an art form, and art is always completely subjective, and you know, it's always open to interpretation, and you just kind of like what you like, and there's no point in arguing about any of it. That's a way more fair argument. But regardless of all of that, there are numerous debates in comic books. Most of them are stupid. There's some that range from the technical, like what's more important to a comic book, the writer or the artist? it can go either way for me. That one could go either way for me. Listen, I like a good story, so I'm usually attracted to the writer. But bad art, comic books are a visual medium, and bad art can really detract from a comic book. And good art can really help sell it. But at the same time, if you have wonderful art and are just telling a shit story, But both of these things are subjective. I know that there's art I do not like that some people do. I know there's art that I like that some people find shitty. I know the same thing with writing. I know there's stories that I really enjoy that some people say are garbage, and I know that there are stories that have held no interest to me that some people say are brilliant. So it's just a subjective thing, but as to whether is the artist or writer more important, I suppose that's something you could actually track, because you could actually just kind of determine, it's like, well, who sells more? Which comic books sell more? Comic books with, somebody who's considered a superstar artist or somebody who's considered a superstar writer? But this is a debate that's been raging for like decades. I think it was like Todd McFarlane who brought it up in the 90s, saying that the writer wasn't that important, and then he and a bunch of other artists went and started Image, and they started with their own comic books, and while they were all superstar artists, their comic books looked great, the writing wasn't very good on a lot of them. Wasn't. For years, a lot of people considered Image to be a beautiful joke because it all looked good, but there was no substance to any of it. It wasn't until they started attracting a lot of really talented writers that things got better. So, that argument, I kind of put it down to, it's a visual storytelling medium. It doesn't work without a good balance between the two. You need at least a good artist and a good writer. That's it. It'd be great if at least one was great, or if both were great. But you know what? But even with that, even with the two things of greatness coming together, it's just, with two things of greatness coming together, it's kind of like, you ever seen like a super group music, like rock band or something like that? And it just ends up being like, who gives a fuck? When the combination should have been great. So sometimes it's like, things don't always mesh just because they're both good independently. I don't know what point I'm trying to make here. But that's like it's kind of a dumb debate that's raged on for history, but I don't know if it's the most useless debate, because, it can mean different things to different people. I'm drawing a blank on what I thought, in my opinion, was the most useless debate in comic books. What did I think was the most useless debate? I already brought up one earlier, like who was more important to Marvel, Stan Lee or Jack Kirby. It's a matter of opinion, though I think that, with enough evidence you can kind of track that. But I brought it up before. I should have thought this through before I started this, huh? I think what I settled on being the most, there's a lot of useless debates. You could think of any of them. You could think of, there's debates about race and gender too that I'm not even going to get into. Are comics too socially conscious or too woke? I hate that fucking word. What's better, independent comic books or corporate? The more, established corporate types. Once again, that's a matter of opinion. It all boils down to a matter of opinion. I think I did settle on which is the better company, Marvel or DC, because I think that's just a stupid fucking debate. No! I remember I remember now. It finally just hit me and what that was. It wasn't Marvel versus DC, but that made me remember what it was, because that brings me to my point. The most useless debate in any comic books is probably the one you have when you're a kid, but most people outgrow, but not everybody does. And that one is, who would win in a fight? Not even specifically who would win in a fight. Just think of any two comic book characters and ask who would win in a fight. That is a useless debate, because it is utterly pointless. Because you know who would win in a fight in a comic book? Whoever the fuck you want to win. Because it's a comic book, it's all made up. It's all fantasy nonsense. So if you want somebody to win, even if there's somebody who shouldn't win, you can figure out a way to make them win. We have had comic books where Superman, a guy who is essentially invincible in almost every way, has fought Batman, a guy who's just a dude who dresses as a bat, and Batman has won. So that shouldn't happen, but because the writers want it to, that's what happened. What made me think about the Marvel versus DC thing, which in itself is a useless debate because it's just a matter of taste. Personally, I like both I like things from both companies, so. And they're both been equally assholes to their fucking workers over the years, so it's not like either one of them holds a moral high ground. But what made me think of that was, in the 90s, there was this thing called Marvel versus DC, or DC versus Marvel. It went by both, because it had a set of writers and artists from each company, and I think each issue switched. There were like 4 issues, and it switched depending on, I think like the first issue was Marvel versus DC, and then the second issue was DC versus Marvel, and then so on and so forth like that. And it had, as the name suggests, it set up a situation where a bunch of well-known Marvel heroes fought a bunch of well-known DC heroes. And they kind of matched them up pretty evenly. There was nobody who was in any way ridiculously outpowering anybody else. So the matchups made sense. But, you know, in the debate of like who would win, it's like, how do you decide that? So what they did was, they had people vote. I think they actually put things in comic books, and I think they may have even used the internet back then, and you could vote on, you could mail in things or go on the internet and do it, and you could just vote on who won, and they just completely left it up to the fans. I think it was like 11 matchups or something like that, and I do remember that Marvel won. I think by like by one fight they won, but yeah. But it was basically just a stupid thing to sell comics because both companies were hurting financially back then. But it proves my point that that's a useless debate over who would win. They just let people decide by fucking Democratic majority vote. And so it doesn't really matter. Anyone you want to win a comic book fight is whoever. That's the useless debate. That's the most useless debate, is who would win in a fight. Now, fortunately, most people grow out of it, but every now and then you'll hear adult comic book, fans bring that up, or have some variation of like, how could this guy win? He shouldn't have won. This dude was way more powerful. Or how does that make sense? It's like, it doesn't have to make sense. It's comic books. It's people with fucking space rings that can create anything they want, or aliens from a different world who are powered by the sun to be fucking gods, or a guy who gets a super soldier serum to make him from a fucking 4F into the epitome of the human male, or a guy who creates a suit of armor, or a fucking Norse god, or a Greek demigoddess, or it's all sorts of shit. It can be anything you want. That's the great thing about comic books. They can be anything you want. So don't be so rigid and stuck in the mud. Just remember that it's all fiction and you can make it whatever you want. That's what good writers do. That's what good creators do. Good artists, good whatever you want to call them. They make whatever they feel like because That's what makes things entertaining. So after, I really should have had that thought out better. I'm sorry. I'm very tired today, and that's probably why I wasn't thinking. I should have had that better prepared in my head. But regardless, we got to where we needed to go. So yeah, that's it for this week. I will see you next Wednesday, and enjoy your reading.